Hello, Eighth, and welcome back. Today is our lesson. So this would be the other video for religion. I may have said that this is Thursday's lesson. Days are all mixed up for all of us. This is Wednesday's lesson for both, okay? So the one for religion, the one for social studies, they're both Wednesday's lesson. So let's begin by correcting our workbook. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody's doing fine. So let's go to our workbook. We're going to begin with workbook page 121. You do know the top section, okay? You had a chart to complete. I said it could be in bullets. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more. I'm going to have slides here to help you, so you can always follow along too. You should have these slides from the other day, but let's begin. So prohibition, it's the manufacture, sale, and transportation of liquor being banned in the United States. So you're going to want to make sure you have that. Manufacture, sale, and transportation of liquor banned in the United States, 18th Amendment. People do begin to manufacture their own liquor at home. So people begin to manufacture their own liquor at home. You're going to want to make sure you have that. In stills at home. They're smuggling it from abroad. They're buying it in what we know as a speakeasy. So that's like your legal bar, the speakeasy. It's an entire new system of organized crime being born because prohibition undermined respect for law. It was repealed. It was repealed by the 21st Amendment. Obviously, people were not following the 18th Amendment. So you have to look at it from the viewpoint of if people are not taking prohibition seriously and they're breaking the law, would that mean society is going to break more laws? So they looked at it from that viewpoint too. When I say they, I mean the government. And undermining laws is the last thing that they would want from the American people. Number two, women's rights. Women won the right to vote in the year 1920. So women won the right to vote in the year 1920. And what you do need to know is that's through the 19th Amendment, right? And soon women became chosen as delegates and elected into political office. Ready-made clothing freed women from having to go ahead and make their own clothing at home, okay? And electric appliances, such as the refrigerator, the washing machine, allow women to spend more time on housework and more time in their career, if that's what they chose. Because many women, as you know, after World War I, starting during World War I and continuing, started to work outside the home, beginning during World War I when their husbands, many men, went to fight in the war. They began to work in their house, outside of the house, and then after World War I, that continued too. Transportation, guys, number three. Transportation's a big one. There's a tremendous rise in automobile sales, so more people are driving further from home to go to work, and it gives rise to the suburbs. So more and more roads are being paved, as we know today, because before you had many dirt roads, a lot of just gravel, but mainly dirt, and you have highways being built. For those who don't know, the I-95, the Eisenhower interstate system that we use was built in the 1950s. The Merritt Parkway was built in the 1930s. That's a part of FDR's New Deal. We'll get to that soon enough. But you're going to have more highways built because more people are going farther for work and recreation as well. There's a great increase in the number of gas stations. They refer to as filling stations, full-service filling stations at the time. And travel became easier and more frequent because more people can go to more places than ever before. And a great thanks to the automobile and a great thanks to Henry Ford, the Model T cost dropping, and that does come about because of his ability to think outside of the box, to go ahead and realize that it's essential to not just continue to make a profit off the American people. Okay, he didn't want people to just have to be rich to buy a car. but he realized that factories can be more efficient than ever before, and therefore the cars can be more reasonable for the American people. Number 4, prohibition. Okay, we're going to go to number 4, prohibition. The era of prohibition, and you may want to highlight or put a star next to this one. You got to know this. You know this already. Just a reminder. The era of prohibition, it's during which alcoholic beverages could not be sold, but it gave a great growth to organized crime. And the reason it gave growth to organized crime is because people were not following this ban of liquor. Instead, actually, people consume more liquor than ever before. So it's people, the American people, going against a rule, an amendment they didn't agree with. Bootleggers during this time, they would get their name. Okay, it's right here in the second paragraph. So bootleggers got their name from smuggled bottles of liquor they would sometimes hide in their boots. Repeal. Repeal is when Congress realized by the end of the 1920s that it was necessary to repeal, to overturn prohibition. And it's a law that many Americans have wanted to repeal for a long time. So in 1933, the United States ratifies the 21st Amendment, and that overturns the 18th. 7, League of Women. League of Women. Terry Chapman Catt is the founder of the League of Women Voters, and they work to educate voters and to fight for women's rights as well. The 18th Amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment. It's important, the Equal Rights Amendment that you know of. You should know the first 2 women governors, Nellie Ross and Miriam A. Ferguson. Women of the suffrage movement also would work to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment would forbid any gender-based discrimination. It bans, you want to put a star, highlight this one, bans any gender-based discrimination. It's never been ratified. And number 9, a suburb. A suburb is a community outside of a city. Suburb is a community outside of a city. More people were able to travel to work now, and great thanks to the automobile. And these communities were located outside the city, so people would drive miles to go to work. Please have the number wrong on the top of your page. Submit that. We're going to continue with some notes for today. And then also don't forget about the textbook pages I've posted as well. So please have the textbook pages complete in great detail. Okay, let's continue right here. This is, I love every single unit that I teach, but this is a really fun one, okay? This is a really fun one. And the 1920s is going to offer a lot, okay? The 1920s is going to offer music, more dance, new games, new other ways of fun sweeping through the country. So how about you pause the video for a moment, go get a note sheet or a piece of paper or print a note sheet here. The option is yours, okay? And let's continue with the notes from the other day. So what was new during the 1920s on the left-hand side? What was new during the 1920s? New fads would catch on in the country. A fad, and you could even put what is a fad on the left. A fad is an activity or fashion that is taken up with great passion for a short time. Dances and crazes came and went rapidly. Dances and crazes came and went rapidly. So you had many new dances, new dance craze, and young women became known as flappers. They're known in society as quote unquote loose women who rebelled against traditional ways of thinking and acting. You could see the women that I have depicted here. Okay, women up here, new clothing, new way of life, new freedom, so to say. Dances, there were many tremendous dance crazes throughout the United States. You had music that was easily accessible. Music was accessible through what you would see here as a record. And the record that you would have generally back then, you would have what we see as 78s. That's the 78s is what they'd be known as. Records have several different sizes, 45s and 33s. But 78s is what you would have here. You'd also have record books like this one here. This is for children, right? Alice in Wonderland, which is a record book, and you open it up and you have a series of different records inside, okay, for the children to go ahead and play. So this was very, very common back then, and there were tremendous new releases that were inspiring more individuals to listen to music. So I'm going to offer an extra credit if hopefully some people don't have the sound off, because you're going to miss the extra credit. The extra credit is this, and I was inspired from a few of our friends in high school who did this. The teacher offered them extra credit to go ahead, because you have these different applications, right? I have the application, TikTok, whatever. I don't know how that works. But what they did was the teacher said, if you make a video of yourself, you take a look at some of the 1920 dances online. Take a video of yourself trying to replicate that dance. I don't know if you can have music there too. Record the video, and you could post on our Google Classroom page, or send it or post it to me privately there. And seeing you, and if you can do that, you know, social distancing, so it can't be with a friend, but if you can do it somehow where two of you maybe did it separately, feel free to go ahead and post that. I'd be happy to take a look on how you are learning a new dance. It doesn't need to be perfect, and that would be a fun activity. So if you do that, I can add extra credit. And we can always, if you don't care, you want the class to see, go ahead and post it on the main page. Just make sure it's all appropriate. Hopefully get a few people to learn some new dances from the 1920s. It's pretty fun, so do check it out. Okay, we're going to have a great activity at the end of the week where we're going to break down some more of these great friends. Louis Armstrong, a tremendous individual. Satchmo is his nickname. Who was Louis Armstrong on the left-hand side, please? Louis Armstrong, you know this great individual through several different songs. He sang Hello, Dolly many years later. You know him. It's a Wonderful World, another great song of his as well. Louis Armstrong is he comes about in this period where you have new music known as jazz, okay? The jazz was new in the 1920s. He's born in New Orleans, okay? But jazz itself was born in New Orleans, and it combines West African rhythms. And jazz, many of you may enjoy it yourself. Your parents or grandparents may like it too. Louis Armstrong was a brilliant African-American musician who helped create jazz. He brought this new rhythm that went ahead and really took the breath away from Americans throughout the whole nation. It's music that they've never heard before. It's a new style, and I'm gonna show you a little piece of his. But you could always look at some music too on your own. But his trumpet playing is absolutely brilliant. He would begin this during this time period and would continue for many years. So his music would be on television, would be in film, and his songs are still played to this day. A tremendous individual who helped change the way people viewed music. Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway, I mentioned, one of the teachers I've had, Mr. Craig Anderson. Mr. Craig Anderson loved Ernest Hemingway. Okay, so on the left-hand side, who was Ernest Hemingway? The other one you should have had, who was Louis Armstrong? For this one, who was Ernest Hemingway on the left-hand side, please? Okay, and Ernest Hemingway is one of the most famous authors of all time. He's going to come out during this time period. He is a brilliant individual who's going to captivate audiences even to this day with his writing. He wrote of his war experiences in a novel called A Farewell to Arms, and the novel is about a young man's disgust for war, so disapproval of war. So you're going to have not only new music, but you're going to have new books as well. You know, Langston Hughes is one of the best known poets of the Harlem Renaissance. But our friend right here is important to remember too, because especially during this time when a lot of people were also disgusted about war, he is going to not only say his disapproval, but even write about it. So it's pretty rebellious, so to say. You're going to see a lot of that. You're going to start to see a lot of new ideas, new beliefs, and new thinking that leads into this new decade. 100 years ago, right? 1920 is 100 years ago this year. Who was Duke Ellington on the left-hand side? Who was Duke Ellington on the left-hand side, please? Okay, so Duke Ellington is going to come about, okay? He's going to come about through in Harlem, because Harlem was home to many popular nightclubs. People came to dance, people came to listen to jazz and to blues musicians and watch shows. And what you do need to know, okay, if anybody wants to see, page 735 has a little bit more. The Cotton Club was one of the most well-known. And Duke Ellington and his orchestra, his band, was a regular club band. So they started off in clubs, the Cotton Club in Harlem in New York. But he would continue, his fame would rise through radio, through records, and eventually through television. His music would also be in film. So he's also withstood the hands of time here. So who was Duke Ellington on the left? Duke Ellington, 1920s, okay? A large number of African-American musicians, artists, and writers settled in Harlem. And this period became known as the Harlem Renaissance. So Harlem is going to bring new writing, new music, new ideas. And Duke Ellington is essential to know, okay, because he becomes a legendary figure as well in jazz. It's a new rhythm, new design in the sense of music, and it's captivating more audiences than ever before. Some people would say that this was a fad, something that was going to come and go. But as you can see, and through history, jazz is not something that has come and gone. You have people who are continuously interested in the great music that these tremendous artists produced during the time, still interested in to this day. W.E.B. Du Bois, hopefully you remember him. He's back again. He's one of the most famous writers of the Harlem Renaissance. And you also have to realize the big point on the bottom, it's essential for us to know that during the Harlem Renaissance, you have young African-American artists who celebrate their heritage, who celebrate their culture, but not just African heritage, but also American heritage, and blending the two together and captivating audience through that style. So this Harlem Renaissance gives so many new musicians, artists, writers, a platform to go ahead and showcase their work. So tremendous period in time, 100 years ago. Okay, you also have a tremendous writer during this time. You could jot down who was Langston Hughes on the left. Who was Langston Hughes? He's the best known poet of the Harlem Renaissance. Best known poet of the Harlem Renaissance. His poetry captures the rhythm of both blues and jazz. And he wove themes of African-American experiences. So in his poems, he's going to go ahead and blend not just his personal experiences, but experiences of African-Americans at the time, also in history and in folk stories and folklore. And he wrote more than 50 books, quite an achievement. Wasn't as appreciated then as he is now, but appreciated during the Harlem Renaissance, yes, but even more so in history, the way he's able to captivate audiences to this day through his writing. Okay, you're also going to have a tremendous amount of sports friends come about here. You're going to have a lot of sports figures come out during this time period. You need to know some of these big names. I mean, who's the biggest sports star in history that's going to come out here? Let's go back. The biggest sports star in history that's going to come out here, without question, arguably the greatest athlete of all time, Babe Ruth is going to come out during this time period. So Babe Ruth, for friends like Gabriella who are going to ask, who's that? It's almost embarrassing, right? We need to look him up. Maria Clara Lesser. Who is that? We need to look him up. You should know who that is. Started off with the Red Sox as a pitcher, becomes a superstar in the New York Yankees in the 1920s as a hitter. He's going to have an incredible amount of home runs, 714. 714 home runs is going to be the record for many years until it was broken in 1974. But arguably the biggest name in sports at the time was Babe Ruth. You're going to have Jack Dempsey, very, very famous boxer, right? If Tyler was around then, maybe they could have competed a little bit with their skills, because I'm sure Tyler is close to his level, we hope. Bill Tilden and Helen Willis they're going to be tennis superstars. Jack Dempsey, going back to our friend here, he was the world champion of boxing for 7 years. Incredible. He held the belt for 7 years. And Bobby Jones is going to be the most famous golf player at the time because Jones would win nearly every single golf tournament at that time. But I'm telling you, when they used to call the old Yankee Stadium the house that Ruth built, it is because fans flocked to games to see this great player known as the Sultan of Swat, one of the first baseball Hall of Famers, hit 60 home runs in 1 year. That comes at a time, I mean, you have guys that hit 50 or whatever now, but 60 came at a time when guys were hitting 15, 12, 20 maybe, not even. He hit 60 home runs. He was hitting more home runs than entire teams put together, so to say. So that's pretty incredible. You're also going to have this great friend who was Charles Lindbergh on the left. Who was Charles Lindbergh on the left-hand side, please? Charles Lindbergh, okay, he flew a plane from New York across the Atlantic Ocean, and he becomes known as Lucky Lindy. Charles Lindbergh, he is known to many at the time as the greatest hero because he captivates the attention of Americans throughout the whole nation. May of 1927, he takes off from an airport in New York to fly nonstop across the Atlantic Ocean alone. Now, I'm upset that we don't get to see this in Washington because we were supposed to see this plane. But take a look at this plane. This is hung up in the Smithsonian Air and Space. Imagine this is little cabin. Here's his space. Okay, that's where he is. He's alone by himself, okay, from New York across the Atlantic Ocean. So he's going to fly by himself 33 hours, okay? The plane has a single engine, okay? The plane has a single engine. He's cramped, it's tight, and he's going to fly over a stormy Atlantic Ocean, okay? He carries no map, no GPS or anything like that, no parachute, no radio, nothing for no communication in that sense. He lands in Paris, France, and they call him Lucky Lindy. He returns to the United States as one of the greatest heroes they had ever seen. That's just incredible. It's almost 100 years ago, but take a look at the plane. He flew in that nonstop over 1 day, okay? How long does it take you to get to Europe right now? All right, how long? It takes 6 hours, depending where you're going to go. Does it take 8 hours generally, right, around that time? He does this by himself, okay? It's the first time anybody flew in one shot from New York across the Atlantic Ocean. You only get one shot, right, because you're traveling across water. And a tremendously brave individual. The Spirit of St. Louis is the plane that he used to fly across. So hanging in the Smithsonian Air and Space. You're also going to have, I love this whole unit, you're also going to have some of the greatest film stars of all time. And I hope you're working diligently on your project that Miss C and I are going to review. These, to me, these are pioneers. Nobody's going to come close to the work that they produced, whether you know the names or not. Okay, on the left-hand side, who were the biggest stars in Hollywood? Who were the biggest stars in Hollywood on the left, please? You're going to have Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford is known as America's sweetheart. Okay, she's known as America's sweetheart. She, her parents were stars of the stage, but by 6 years old, she's starting to look at her parents and see what they're able to do here on stage. Okay, not film, because no film hadn't become what it would yet. And she's going to become a tremendously devoted individual, one of the biggest stars of all time. I always bring these in every year. I do have, if you take a look here, this is I usually like to pass these around. That is a piece of a wardrobe that she wore, a piece of her wardrobe that she wore in film nearly 100 years ago. Mary Pickford is she comes up, you see her image as a really kind, quiet, sweet, rule-following lady. She becomes one of the most brilliant individuals, okay, in film history. She will marry Douglas Fairbanks, a tremendous individual in his own right in film, in acting, and in leading. They would go ahead and they would come up, okay, with United Artists. And they would go ahead, basically what they're doing, and along with Charlie Chaplin, is they're going to create their own film studio. Mary Pickford Douglas Fairbanks also had an estate called Pickfair in Hollywood. It's since been knocked down, unfortunately. But she's just a brilliant individual. She is one of the first individuals to have her handprints in front of the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, which also comes out during the 1920s. Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd. Great comedic actors. Out of this whole group, if you don't know any, I'm not sure, but Charlie Chaplin may have been the first one to come to mind. Those three are simply brilliant, okay? They performed their own stunts. They didn't have, here and there they had stunt doubles, but they wanted to perform all the skits by themselves. You can see Harold Lloyd, one of his most famous scenes, hanging on the clock. These individuals took risks. They were fantastic performers. They were the first of their time. Lillian Gish, okay, top right-hand side. Again, I have pieces of their wardrobe just because I'm fascinated with their work. She's generally called the First Lady of America's cinema. She's the most prominent star, the most well-known star in the 1920s and 1930s. And some people will say she's the greatest actress of all time, but many people will say she's the greatest actress of the silent film era. She worked extensively with W.D. Griffith. W.D. Griffith was a very famous head of film. Very, very brilliant. UA stands for United Artists. United Artists, I told you, was Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Charlie Chaplin would put together. This was the first time you had these big stars. So what did people like to do a lot? People didn't know the consequences, the issues that smoking prevented. So many people would unfortunately do that back then. So they would have not only baseball cards in their packs, but you have film stars. And they were film star cards, player cards. And you would get one if you buy a pack of cigarettes. So this is the first time you're going to go ahead and have these big, big stars captivate audiences. And movie stars to this day, but back then this was something new. And I'm going to show you some of their clips. I hope you appreciate what they're going to do. This is something new, and they're really, really going to set a great standard for us to follow. Who was Mary Pickford on the left? For anybody who has some time, who may want to know a little bit more about film history, Mary Pickford is known as America's sweetheart. She is going to be a standard for women, and she's going to pull for women's rights in film, okay? She's a strong, strong woman in Hollywood. She plays, I told you, a very gentle character, but she realizes the amount of money the film studios are making. So she's going to demand a large sum of money to play these lead characters. She's not going to get played around in the sense of, because she's a woman, she's not going to have that lucrative contract. She's going to demand it. And she's the first one to do that as a female actress. And she could ask for so much because the fans loved her. And she's one of the first major celebrities. Some people say she is the first celebrity in that sense, because people were captivated by her. They idolized her. Her film, to this day, just resonates as a great, great human being. She would live for many years, and unfortunately, went similar to a lot of other people. When sound came into the movies, okay, their careers went down. Not all of them, but a lot of silent stars were not able to hold their ground during that time. Charlie Chaplin, who was Charlie Chaplin on the left-hand side? Who was Charlie Chaplin? Please. Charlie Chaplin was a legendary comedian who brought laughs to his audiences while challenging them to question their world. Charlie Chaplin is an individual who many people easily recognize. A 75-year career in film, starting off in silent pictures. I showed you a film that I had of him the other day. His signature character, that top hat, the little skinny mustache, the suit kind of like thrown together, tie just thrown together, that's known as the Tramp. Charlie Chaplin, that's a character, okay? As he gets older, you're going to see him doesn't look like that, does not wear that in public. That's his character, walks around with a cane. I have a big picture of him in my classroom, the poster. I hope some of your lockers might be near there. The Tramp provides comedic commentary in a modern world and a great entertainment for his peers. His slapstick comedy is simply brilliant. It's funny, it's hilarious, and if you've never got a chance to see it, please do check it out. I told you he would have his own studio, okay? He would have his own studio and United Artists, and Charlie Chaplin's own studio to this day, unfortunately, guys, it's not there. But the property is there, and guess who owns it, okay? Last year's group, Ariana, Maria Clara, they loved this when I told them. But take a look. Here's his old film studio. Here's what it was back then, and here it is now. And I'll put myself right near our great friend Kermit. The Jim Henson Company, Jim Henson Studios, is actually the one who bought this studio. And as you can see, Kermit dressed as Charlie Chaplin, keeping the legacy of film alive. Appreciate the great legacy of these individuals during the time. They set the standard for the years to come. Don't forget the corrections, the notes, and the textbook page. I have some fun clips to show you in the days to come, so I hope we can enjoy them and really dissect them. So what I'm telling you is get ready for that. Get excited for that. Until next time.